Hello and welcome. So last time we spoke about the switch statement, and in this section we will be creating a simple calculator. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new scene. You of course don't have to, you can do everything in one scene, but I prefer to have each section separate. So I'm going to call this scene just calculator. Okay, and I'm going to open it. Now we have an empty scene. I'm just going to select the main camera and set the clear flags to be a solid color, and then I'm just going to set something like this, gray. I'm also going to, under game, here I have my aspect ratio. I'm going to choose a different aspect ratio. Let's see, maybe 5 and 4 is a good one. We don't need our directional light, we can delete that from our scene. So for a calculator, we're going to be needing a canvas. So let's create a canvas. So under create UI, let's go ahead and select canvas. And you can see that the event system was created for us. So what I want our calculator to do is we will have two text boxes that will take integers, and then we'll enter some values in them. Then we will have buttons to either add or subtract those numbers. Just go ahead and right click on canvas, go to UI, and we want the, where is it? Input field. Select input field. Okay, let me just reposition it. I'm going to set the anchors to, actually let's leave the anchors at center and move it like that. Position X minus 100 and position Y maybe also minus, okay, 100. And I will call this input field number 1. Then I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to set the position X to 100 now, and I will call it number 2. Okay, let's select our number 1 and let's scroll down. Content type is going to be integer number, as well as for the second one. So now if I run this, I can only type in numbers into this, no letters, which will be great for our calculator. If we had any letters or special characters, it would confuse the engine and things wouldn't be working properly. Let me just now create a UI text just so we have a nice, let's call this enter number 1, and let's position it at minus 100 and this 120. Okay, I'm going to set the text to be white, and then I'm going to duplicate this text, call it enter number 2. I'm just going to move it to position X of 100. There we go, that looks really nice. Okay, so now we need some buttons. Let's go ahead and click on canvas, UI, button, and let's just, oops, not with, let me position it to 50. I want to rescale it because this button is too big. No, that's okay. Let me just go to the text. I don't want it to say button, I want it to say maybe plus. Okay, let's just change the width of this button to maybe 80. Actually, let's see 60. Okay, 60 is fine. I'll call this button add, and let's duplicate this button. Call this one subtract. Go to the text. I will type in a minus now, and now let's just move this button to position X 50. Also, let's take him up a bit, maybe minus 50. Okay, now we have these two numbers, these two buttons for add and subtract. I'm going to duplicate one of these texts. Duplicate it. I'm just going to move it to center it here, and I will call it the result is. Just move it on the X a bit so it looks nice and centered. Okay, 40 is a nice value, and the result is we'll have a text, also a text underneath, which I will call result, and I will just set it to be -20, and this will by default be 0. Let's just set the position X now to be maybe 80. Okay, great. And now we have this nice simple calculator user interface. So now if I can enter some number here, 20, and in here I can say 10, and then if I press plus, I want the result to show 30. Also, what I noticed, here it says enter text. We don't want that. We want to say enter number. So we'll go ahead and click on our number 1 input field, go to text, actually placeholder, and remove enter text and say enter number. Do the same thing for the other input field, enter number. Okay, now we have this nice UI. Let me drop down the canvas. The canvas is about done for the simple UI. Let's create a empty game object. This game object will be holding our script, and it will be handling all the inputs. So let's call this game object calculator. And in our scripts folder, I will create a new script called calculator. Let's open it. Reload all. And let's actually continue this in the next lecture. This one is getting pretty long. So thank you for watching, and we'll continue next time. Hello and welcome back. So let's continue with our calculator. Open up our calculator script, and if we see our calculator canvas currently has two input fields in which users will be entering numbers. So we need to reference them somehow so we can do something with them in our script. So let's go ahead and create a public input field, and let's call it input field 1. And you can see that Visual Studio is confused. It's telling me that I can't do this. That's because we're working with UI and we need to import a library. So let's say using Unity engine.ui, and now we can see it recognizes the input field. And we also need a second one, so let's say public input field 2. Okay, so now if we go back into Unity, and if I take my calculator script and just drag it to my calculator game object, you can see we have two parameters here for two input fields. And now let's just drag the first one in here and then the second one. Okay, but then we have these two buttons that when we press one, we want to either add these two numbers together or subtract one from the other. And then we have the result text. So let's go ahead and create a reference, a public text called result text. Now back in Unity, if we wait a moment, we'll see that we have another parameter here, and let's just plug in our result text in here. And I will just, to make sure that it's always 0, void start when the game starts. So when we run our calculator application, we want to say result text, that text is equal to 0. Now back in Unity, let me just clear these warnings. We want to create a method. When we click plus, we want these two numbers to be added together. Let's go ahead and say void add, and we need to create two integers since we're working with integers, and currently we have no integers in our script. We only have input fields, so I'll create them in here. I will say int number 1 is equal to int dot parse and input field 1 dot text. This will basically take the text contained in the input field and then convert it to an integer, and then that integer will be stored in number 1. So basically, if I run my app and in here type, let's say 51, and then I were to press plus, this would be called, and we would create the integer called number 1, and then we will store 51 into that integer. So this is basically, this means that whatever is written in here is going to be converted to an integer. And let's do that same thing for the second number. So int number 2 is equal to int parse input field 2.text. And now we simply need to add these two numbers together. We could create a new variable, but we can simply say result text.text is equal to number 1, actually number 1 plus number 2 string. So we're going to add these two numbers together, and then we're going to convert them to a string, and then that result will be written in the text box. So let's save this. And currently this won't work because we need to set up our button to call this method when it's clicked. So let's go ahead and click on the add button and scroll down on click here, add a new function. I will say editor and runtime. Then we will reference our calculator game object, and from here we need to get our method, but it needs to be a public method. Forgot about that, sorry. So let's say public void add, and now calculator, let's just wait for it to update, and now it's done. Calculator, and here we have add. So now if I run the game, the result is 0, but if I say 5 here and 4 here and plus plus, we get a 9. I can also call this method more times to get more results. Simply change the value here, and you can see our calculator is working perfectly fine. But we now need to create a subtract method. This is going to be really simple, the same as the previous one. So let's say public void subtract, and again let's say int number 1. We're going to parse the input field text to an integer, and number 2 parse the second input field text, and again just result text.text is equal to number 1 minus number 2, in this case to string. Okay, so let's save that, go back into Unity, and let's get on our subtract button, scroll down on the onClick method, add a editor and runtime function, reference our calculator game object, and go ahead and click on calculator and subtract. There it is. So now if I run, the result is 0 as we wanted it, and then if we say 10 and in here say 5, the result is 5. 10 minus 2 is 8, and minus 3 is 7. But now we have a few problems. What if I were to say 9 here and 12 here and press minus? It's minus 3. Well, it's not a problem. But we would have problems if we added multiplication and division, because we're working with integers and not whole numbers. So I want you to create on your own a multiplication button and a division button, and in the next lecture, if you weren't able to create it yourself, we'll do it together. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hello and welcome back. So let's continue with our calculator. So we added the method for adding and subtracting, and it works perfectly. But now I want to add multiplication and division. So let's go ahead and move this, the result is and 0 text a bit down. Let's just select it and say position Y maybe, oh sorry, minus 20, and for result minus 40. Okay, and now I'm going to duplicate the add button. I'm just going to move it to 10, and I will change the text to a multiplication icon. Here it is. Let's just click on this. Let's increase the font size of this so it looks a bit better. There we go. It looks centered now. I will call this multiply. And you can see that now it's also calling the add method because we duplicated. Just click on this minus so it doesn't call that method. And then I'm going to get subtract and also duplicate that. Just move it on divide to 20. Sorry, 10. I'm gonna call it divide and go to text and just get in here the division symbol and click on our divide button and make sure that onClick is empty currently. So let's go ahead and back in our script create methods for multiplication. So let's say public void multiply, and again we can say int number 1 is equal to int, and we want to parse the input field 1.text, and int number 2 is equal to int parse input field 2.text, and finally the result text.text is going to be equal to number 1 times number 2 to string. Okay, so let's save this, go back into Unity, click on our multiply button, now click on this plus here, and create a new editor and runtime only. Reference our calculator game object, click on the no function, go to calculator, and call the multiply method. So now if I run this, if I say 5 and in here 2 and I multiply, the result is 10. 5 times 10 is 50, and you get the idea, it works perfectly. Okay, so now we need to do some for division. Again, let's create a public void called divide. So int number 1, int parse. We want to parse the integer from input field 1. And then int number 2, int parse input field 2.text. And again, the result text.text is going to be equal to number 1 divided by number 2 to string. Now if I save this and we go back into Unity, click on our divide button, go in here on the onClick method, say editor and runtime, reference our calculator, go ahead and go to calculator and call divide. So now if I run, if we say 10 and here 2, we divide, the result is 5. But if I say 10 and 3, the result is 3, which isn't really accurate. And that's because we're working with integers, which are whole numbers. But if I say 2 divided by 6, we get 0 because you can't divide this. To fix that, we can simply go to our number 1 and just say that this is going to be a decimal number. And for number 2 as well, say that it's a decimal number. And now back in our script, where we had int, we'll just simply say float. Let's copy this, and we, instead of parsing an integer, we are going to parse a float. And now we're going to be getting pretty accurate results. So let's save that, and now back into Unity. If I run this now, and now if I say 2 and 3, if I 2 divided by 3 is 0.6666, and you see we have a lot of numbers here. Now we spoke about how you can limit how many decimals are shown. It's really simple, just go to toString here, and in here we say hashtag and 02. I believe it's like this. I'm not really sure. If I'm wrong, I apologize. Yeah. Oh, but now we don't have the number. I think it's like this. Let's go ahead and check that out. No. With a dot, let's see that. Real sorry, I sometimes forget these small things. You can always Google them. And yeah, this is the one. 0.42. You can always Google and find out if you really need to. 12 times 10, 120. So yeah, there you go. Our calculator is done. You can of course add more buttons to it if you wish. And also now, if you want to impress your friends, we can go ahead and build this for a Android phone or an iOS, whatever you wish. But actually what I want to build it for is WebGL, so I can run it in my browser and you can see that it actually works. So I'm going to switch platform to WebGL. Okay, and now I'm going to just build and run this. Just build it in here. Yeah, whatever, call it build. Okay, now we wait for it to build. Come on. Let me just create a new folder here called WebGL calc. Build it in there. Now it's building our calculator. This might take a few moments, especially building for WebGL takes a bit longer than building for PC or Android. You can also make stunning games and upload them on the internet to WebGL, which is really cool in my opinion. You don't need to download games, you can play them in your browser. And anytime now. Come on. But yeah, if you don't want to continue watching, we're done with our calculator. You can go ahead and continue to the next section. But if you want to test it out yourself and build it, you can of course build for Android, iOS, PC or whatever. You can show off your newly acquired skills to your friends. If not, no, you don't need to. This is taking much longer than expected, to be honest with you. Anyway, in the next section we will be starting with our game development, and we'll start off by creating a simple 2D platformer. We're going to have a character. We will give you assets. It's a character that we made for you guys. You can use it in your games, as well as any other assets acquired in this course. But in the next section, we'll be creating a 2D side-scroller. We'll have a character. He'll be able to run around, jump and shoot. And you'll see it's going to be something like Mario, Mega Man, and those games. Anyway, I'll end the lecture here and upload the next lecture when this is done, so you don't have to wait for it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later. Goodbye. Hey, and welcome back. Last time I made a silly mistake of forgetting to include our scene into the scenes in build here in the build settings. So I had some problems building, but off camera I just added my scene here. You can just drag it in or add open scenes. And we just need the one scene calculator, which is called, in my case, don't know how you called it. And then I just built it. And here in our folder we get these 3 files. So we get 2 folders and the index.html. Now if we open this with Firefox, we will see that our calculator is running in a browser. Now you can only run this locally on Firefox. Only Firefox will run these WebGL builds. But if you do in fact upload this to a server, then any browser can access these games. But currently, since we're just on index.html, we're running it locally, only Firefox can do it. And now we can see Unity WebGL, and here project 1, the name of my project. And now it's going to load our calculator. Just give it a few moments, and there it goes, made with Unity. And here we go, enter one number, enter another, and let's see. Let's add some numbers there. Now we can divide them, we can multiply them, sorry, we can add them, subtract them, and it works perfectly. And there you go, our calculator is built and running on Firefox. You can build it for Android, iOS, or any of these platforms if you so desire. I won't go into too many details on building for now. We'll continue with our game development in the next sections, and we'll talk about builds in more depth in a later video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you then. Goodbye.